Henry Whitman woke up early, even before the city fully shook off the night. At 63, his sleep was light, almost fragile, as if life had taught him not to cling too tightly to rest. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the old house creak and pop, and looked at a faded photograph on the wall, him in a dark suit, confident, standing beside the first building he ever opened. Back then, he was someone. Now, just an old man, almost invisible to the world that once celebrated him. Henry Whitman had been one of the wealthiest men in Riverview, Ohio. Not a billionaire on TV, not a man with a flashy name, but the one people called when they needed help. If someone needed medical bills covered, a struggling business rescued, or a teenager's college tuition paid, they came to Henry. And Henry helped. He never asked for repayment. He never forced contracts or signatures if he saw honesty in someone. Money, to him, wasn't the goal, it was a tool. If you had it and someone was drowning, you either threw a lifeline, or you lived with the weight of doing nothing. "I'm not a savior," he would say. "I just can't turn away." His house was near downtown, big and bright, with a wide porch. It had always been alive, people visiting for coffee, advice, or just for a silent company. Henry listened to all of them. He had lost his wife early and had no children. Perhaps that's why he clung so tightly to people, they filled the emptiness and made him feel needed. Years were generous. His businesses grew. Property values rose. Money worked for him. And still, Henry shared. He thought it would last forever. But life doesn't promise forever. It started small. A lost contract. A partner who vanished with funds. Investments gone bad at the wrong time. Henry sold properties, covered debts, and helped people even when he had little left. He never complained. "This is just life," he would say to anyone who came. Then he noticed something strange, the phone stopped ringing. The people who once came by without knocking now sent brief messages. And soon, even they were gone. Henry still had money. But not enough to fix everything as he once had. And that's when the real disappearance began. People didn't leave immediately. They just became too busy. Some didn't answer calls. Some promised to visit but never did. Some smiled politely as he walked past and quickly turned away. Henry didn't get angry, at least, he tried not to. Inside, however, he sometimes felt a quiet ache, not from loss of wealth, but from losing significance. One day, he met Michael, a young man whose college tuition Henry had once paid. Michael had become a successful lawyer, confident, sharp. Henry called out, "Michael." The young man paused, glanced back, and smiled faintly, a smile that barely remembered who Henry was. "Mr. Whitman, hi," he said. "I'm glad you're doing well," Henry replied. "Yes, work is busy," Michael said quickly and stepped away. He left without asking how the man who gave him a chance was doing. Henry watched him walk away and slowly turned homeward. He began noticing details, how people avoided eye contact, how conversation stopped when he approached, how "let's catch up soon" was meaningless. One cold evening, he sat on a bench near his home. Beside him, a stranger, thin, in a worn coat, tired eyes. "Nice evening," the man said. "Yes," Henry replied. They sat in silence. And that silence was strangely comforting. No expectations. No demands. Just presence. "You live here long?" the man asked. "All my life," Henry said. The man said he'd just lost everything, job, friends, hope. Henry saw himself in those words. He handed the man a few dollars. "Take this. For dinner," he said. The man accepted, surprised, and thanked him sincerely. And in that moment, Henry felt something stronger than years of attention, pure, human gratitude. That night, Henry reflected, helping people was never a mistake. The mistake had been expecting people to remember. Months passed slowly. Henry sold another car, then a portion of land. People stopped calling him for help. The world that once celebrated him now ignored him quietly, like a song fading from memory. He no longer felt needed. The phone remained silent. Friends became strangers. The very people whose lives he had touched seemed to vanish as soon as his fortune diminished. Henry didn't feel anger. Not really. He only felt the strange, hollow absence of acknowledgement. One day, he met Sarah in the park, a woman in her 40s with her young daughter. They were new to Riverview. She had come seeking a fresh start, and her child's laughter as she fed pigeons caught Henry's attention. He sat down nearby. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Of course," she replied. They began to talk. She shared small pieces of her life, challenges, fears, little victories. Henry didn't offer solutions, at least not financial ones. He simply listened. And for the first time in years, he realized that the people who needed presence rather than money were the ones who stayed. Sarah and her daughter began visiting more frequently. Henry never asked about their past or wealth. They didn't need to. He simply became part of their quiet routine, a constant but unobtrusive presence. Then came the unexpected. One morning, an official letter arrived. It concerned the last piece of land he had sold years ago, now part of a major city project. Its value had multiplied tenfold. Henry was legally entitled to compensation. The amount was enormous, enough to restore him to the wealth that everyone once envied. He held the letter, staring at the numbers. He felt nothing. Not joy, not excitement. Only the question, what now? When the news inevitably spread, the city began to notice him again. Phones rang, old acquaintances returned, and those who had long forgotten him suddenly remembered. "Henry. We haven't seen you in years. You were always such a good man. Remember how you helped me?" Henry listened quietly. He had lived this scene before. He knew how it would end. He accepted the money. But he didn't buy a new house. He didn't restore his old lifestyle. Instead, he did something entirely different. Henry opened a small community center. No plaques. No advertising. Just a space for people to come, talk, be heard, and find support, not financial, but human. Counseling. Learning. Quiet companionship. Old friends who had expected charity vanished quickly when they realized there were no free handouts. But those seeking guidance and presence stayed. For Henry, this was richer than any fortune. Even his health, now declining, could not diminish the satisfaction he found there. People came, left, returned, and the center thrived quietly. Henry had finally built something lasting, not dependent on wealth, but on humanity. He often sat by the window late at night, watching the city lights flicker, reflecting on the truth he had learned: money shows who wants to be around you. Its absence shows who really is. And that, he realized, was the wealth that mattered. In his final years, Henry Whitman woke up at dawn, as always. The city hummed outside, unaware of the small man watching from a modest apartment. The community center thrived quietly, run by young volunteers who never knew who Henry had been before. To them, he was just the old man with wise eyes and a calm presence. That was exactly how he wanted it. He often reflected on the irony of life. People flocked to him when he had money. When he had little, they disappeared. And yet, the ones who truly mattered were never there for his fortune, they were there for him. Not for what he had, but for who he was. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, Henry sat alone. He opened an old notebook, a journal he had kept for years, filled with observations rather than memories or regrets. He wrote slowly, deliberately. "If you are reading this, I have gone. Do not search for who I was. Look instead at who you are when you have nothing to give." That is where the truth lives. He closed the notebook gently and placed it on the table. The next morning, Henry did not come to the center. Volunteers noticed his absence but assumed he was delayed. Hours passed, then a day. And then the truth settled quietly over the small community. Henry Whitman had passed. There were no headlines. No citywide announcements. A few people who truly mattered came, Sarah and her daughter, some elderly men who had found friendship there, a handful of volunteers. They did not speak loudly. They simply remembered. They simply honored. The city continued to buzz around them, as it always did, indifferent to the small, profound life that had quietly ended. And yet, the lessons Henry left behind rippled silently, deeply. He had once been celebrated for his wealth. Forgotten when it vanished. And finally remembered for his humanity. The center carried on, a living testament. Children learned, adults found guidance, and those who came seeking nothing but presence were not disappointed. In the quiet of his apartment, the rain tapping against the window, the city lights flickering, the truth remained. Money shows who wants to be around you. Its absence shows who really stays. And when all else fades, only your presence, your care, your humanity, will leave a mark that truly matters. Henry Whitman's legacy was not in dollars or deeds recorded in ledgers. It was in the invisible threads of human connection he nurtured quietly, in silence, in the spaces where people could simply be themselves. And in that, he was richer than any fortune could ever make him. The city moved on. But in the hearts of those who had been touched by him, even briefly, Henry Whitman lived on, unseen, remembered, and never forgotten.